Welcome to The Digital Patient, where we discuss the latest advancements in digital patient engagement and share stories from the front lines. I'm your host, Alan Sardana, and with me as always is SeamlessMD's CEO, Dr. Joshua Liu. Today we're joined by our awesome guest, Crystal Broj, Enterprise Chief Digital Transformation Officer at the Medical University of South Carolina. Ms. Broj, Crystal, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alan. Hey, Joshua, good to see you.
Yeah, it's amazing having you on today. We're so thrilled to talk with you about all the exciting work that you're doing at MUSC. But before we jump into that, I did want to dive a little bit into your backstory and understand, what motivated you to get into tech in the first place.
So when I was deciding what I wanted to do when I grew up and picking a college, my uncle worked for IBM. Seeing what he was doing, I was always interested in his work. And so I decided, tried some computer courses in high school. And that was back when you sent the cards to the community college and you got your feedback the next day. There was very few PCs, for example, until a little bit later on. And then I went into college doing IT, learning IT, getting in a bachelor's in, they called it computer science back then. But it was a different time. There weren't a lot of women in that whole arena. There wasn't STEM, there wasn't any of those things. And as I grew through the ranks, it was for the first maybe 10 years of what I was doing. I'd go to conferences and stuff. I'd be the only woman in a room of, a ton of blue and black suits. So I'm super happy to see that changing and excited to be that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm super passionate about STEM. And I work with young kids and try to mentor them as well. So
I know prior to getting into healthcare, you'd done just a ton of work with consulting and tech. And now you're leading digital transformation at MUSC with a tripartite focus on research, education, and in the health system itself. What are the main differences you've seen working in healthcare versus non-healthcare industries?
I think there's more similarities than differences. I worked in health clubs, for example, for a while, and we digitized some processes like for personal trainers or tennis pros or front desk staff, and it's always the same. It's the same as almost anywhere. We have to make it easy for the tech to be used. Whether you're a doctor or a front desk person or a salesperson, a tennis pro is really good at teaching you tennis, but you know what they're not probably good at is computer. And what they don't want is a computer thing that they have to do, and they look silly when they're trying to book an appointment or do something else on the computer, especially when they're doing it in front of one of their clients. And it's the same thing in healthcare. Providers are really busy people. Doctors and nurses, not one of them ever said, I want to go to college and go through 8 years of medical school so I can type in an EHR. Nobody says that. What they want to do is do their jobs, take care of people. And so it's our job in digital transformation to make sure that that works for them. The other thing I think that's different in healthcare is that it takes time. It takes time to get an idea adopted. It takes time for competing resources in IT especially getting those folks that we need to help make things digital. So I think that's maybe a bigger difference than being in private sector stuff.
I think we've seen a lot of folks kind of leave private sector and other industry and then go into healthcare and then get surprised by, to your point, Crystal, how much longer it sometimes takes to get tech adoption in healthcare. What are the biggest reasons you feel like tech doesn't adopt as quickly in healthcare compared to other fields?
I think that our IT resources are constrained quite a bit. And I think that a hospital is a really, really big place, right? There's a lot of people, there's a lot of voices. And so getting everybody on the same page for something like that, we're also risk adverse. So we want to make sure that we're not putting tech in for tech's sake, but instead that it's really going to make a difference. And, we always say here that we don't want to put some tech on just because it's cool. We want to do it and have to take something else off the provider's plate in order to put that on. It has to make it better, because learning some other way of doing things when you're really, really busy is not something that you want to invest the time in. So it just takes time to do the change management. It takes time to do the training. It takes time to have IT resources as well.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, I think, because, Alan and I, I guess, are more in the industry space right now. So, I'll be honest, we're probably at our desks way more than any clinician. I think sometimes folks who aren't in healthcare don't realize your nurses, your physicians, your staff, they're not at their desk all day. They're in the operating room. They're on the floors, they're seeing patients. So for you to weave tech in throughout that day-to-day workflow is so much harder than in worlds where everyone's at their desk all day long.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Well, Crystal, speaking of saving time, you recently launched Emily, MUSC's 24/7 digital assistant for patients. Could you tell us a little bit more about that initiative?
Yeah, we're very excited about Emily, like MUSC, not Emily named after my daughter, although some people think I named it that for that reason. Other people voted on it, wasn't me. But our voice bot answers calls in our call center. It can recognize speech patterns, so it can confirm, cancel, answer frequently asked questions, but it's not press 1 for this, press 2 for that. Instead, it literally says, "Hi, I'm Emily, your digital assistant. How can I help you today?" And then I'd like to confirm my appointment. Sure, let me get some information, and then I'll look up your appointments. I see you have an appointment on Tuesday and on Thursday. Which one do you want to know about? The one on the 14th. Sure, no problem. And it understands that whole conversation and goes through. So what we've seen is that it's definitely starting to pick up. It learns. So it's containing about 14% of the calls right now. So it's able to handle some of them. It can't reschedule yet. It can't schedule. So those still go to an operator. But it has saved our PAC members, our Patient Access Center, time. They noticed the first day that all of a sudden their phones weren't ringing like crazy because Emily was answering them. And so all of a sudden it was like, wow, this never happens. So starting to see some relief in the PAC. We're looking to keeping enhancing it and moving more. The thing with any AI, and I'm here at the AI4 conference this week, but any AI is that it takes time. We were talking about time, Josh. It takes time. You really have to train them, and they just need more baking. Like it can understand date of birth because we have to confirm who you are, right? So date of birth. But if you say 1/1/1970, it doesn't understand that out of the box. It knows a date as 01/01/1970, right? And so you have to teach it that if they say 1/1, that's what they mean. If I cancel my appointment, you have to get some identification. My last name is really hard. It's Broj. So it says, my name is Crystal Broj. And the bot will go back, "Oh, I heard Broj, Broy. Is that correct?" And I'll say, no, it's Broj. And she says, "Oh, your name is no, Broj." And then, so then I go, "No, it's B as in Bravo, R as in Rabbit." And that's great. And we probably could do that with like the NATO alphabet and say, if they say B as in Bravo, but I live in the South, so people would probably say B as in bourbon, R as, and so trying to get, it's still a computer. You still have to program it behind the scenes and then have it learn from that. So we're still training Emily. We're still teaching her things. We're up to 27 lines. We have 40 lines in the Patient Access Center. So we've done it slowly and moved line by line across various lines. We should have it completely rolled out by the end of summer, and then we'll train her in Spanish. We're seeing greater satisfaction scores right now. She gets about 4.5 out of 5 scoring, so that's great. Patients like her. The first day we had a patient had to get accelerated because she wanted to schedule an appointment, but she said that it was so friendly and so easy to use, totally without anybody asking. So I think that's a big win too.
Today's episode is brought to you by Seamless MD, which enables health systems to digitize patient care journeys, leading to lower lengths of stay, readmissions, and costs. Josh, you used to be a doctor. Did you ever feel like patients showed up unprepared for surgery? Or maybe you felt like you were sending patients into a black hole after discharge?
All the time. We give patients paper and verbal instructions, which are so easy to forget and really hard to follow. And we have no idea what happens to them outside the hospital. So what happens? Well, because we worry about them, we keep patients in hospital longer, but that drives up length of stay and lowers throughput. Plus, after they leave, patients get readmitted for infections and all kinds of problems that we could have just caught earlier if we monitored patients.
What if I told you there was a way to give every patient a virtual companion so you could automatically engage and monitor them through a surgery, a cancer journey, or a chronic care journey, and drop the length of stay, increase throughput, and lower readmissions?
Gosh, Alan, that would be amazing.
So that is exactly what Seamless MD does. It allows health systems to engage patients on their own phone, tablet, or computer with automated reminders, education, and symptom monitoring. Basically a GPS through any healthcare journey.
That sounds fantastic, but does it actually work?
It does. Health systems have done over 40 studies and evaluations showing how they use the solution to reduce length of stay by 1 to 2 days, readmissions by up to 89%, and costs by over $1,000 per patient.
But how does that work with my EHR?
That's the best part. Seamless MD is the only solution in this space with direct integration partnerships with Epic and MyChart, Oracle Cerner, and Meditech.
Well, I am getting a colonoscopy soon, so I really need something like this. Where can my health system learn more?
Well, Josh, thanks for letting me know. Your health is very important, and endoscopy is just one out of the 50+ out-of-the-box care plans available today on Seamless MD. go to www.seamless.md. That's www.seamless.md to learn more.
That's amazing. Can I ask you, so, I mean, clearly it's still learning. Emily's still learning. You're teaching the bot new things over time, which means that you didn't wait for perfection before you went, live. And you gave a great example just now of how, like, maybe things you didn't expect it to get confused by, now that I hear about it, actually makes sense that it would get confused at first. So, like, how did you decide, like, you know what, let's just go live and see what happens? Like, how ready did you feel like you had to be before you went live in the first place?
We did a lot of testing, Joshua, a lot. We had in like testing workbooks, and we had my whole team, and I'm a team of 8 all testing. We had some fellows testing. We had people from the Patient Access Center testing. That was a good way because then they also understood what patients would be hearing on the line. So we probably tested for over 2 months very extensively. And we knew some things weren't going to be perfect, but we also knew we would learn more from her being imperfect and seeing what those calls are in order to then train her to do other stuff. We didn't know names. I mean, we knew she had some problems with some names. Broj is a hard name. Who knew? And so we knew that there would be. So we ended up changing, the vendor actually changed the back end of speech recognition to an Azure version, which was much more advanced than when we first started the project. We loaded the top 5,000 last names in South Carolina, so she could learn that as well. So it's just different pieces that we learned that we had to continue to work on. People say appointment or my time or my, everybody says something different. My visit, and that we had trained so that visit equals appointment equals that, so that it would know that there's multiple words that can be used for that. Yeah. And we go over it weekly still. We started going live at the end of June, and every week we go over the call logs and see where she gets stuck so we can try to change it.
And I know folks listen to this, actually myself included, are always curious about how you think about measuring success and ROI for these initiatives. Like, what were the top 2 or 3 KPIs that mattered most to you for this?
It was containment was our big thing. We wanted to see how many things she could do on her own. Right now, we're at about 14% that she either can do the confirm, cancel, or that it gets passed to another department. Like people call for billing. Well, that really isn't Patient Access Center anyway, so it has to be transferred to a billing line. But now a person doesn't have to pick up and then transfer it to billing. It goes straight there. So my chart resets, those kind of things go to the right department now without having to ever hit that. That's one of the big things, is that, and then the time savings because of that.
I'm curious, like, if I were to call in right now, does Emily sound obviously like a bot, or does it sound like, that recent OpenAI kind of launch with ChatGPT where I think it was 4.0, where the voice sounds very natural, very human-like? Does it sound similar to that, or does it sound obviously like a bot still?
We had choice. We were able to do choice. We could have gotten an actor and recorded a voice. We could have made her sound Southern. We could have done a bunch of different things. And we made a decision to make it a nice sounding robot. Not I am Emily, but she'll say, I'm Emily, your digital assistant. How can I help you today? Want to make sure that people knew they weren't talking to a live person, and consistently with that. And when she's looking up your information or stuff, you'll hear like a little bit of clicking, because it takes a second for her to retrieve your record or do something like that, so that they would know that something is happening behind the scenes.
So I'm always curious about how much of it is just it being more human-like that folks will adopt it more. But I think you're right. Like, that transparency around, like, just knowing that it's a digital assistant is really important. So that makes sense. So we were already talking about bots. So, I guess we can shift to AI more broadly. You're obviously speaking about AI as we record this at a conference this week. I think before this call started, you were telling us how, like, you tend to, I think, bucket a few main categories health systems are looking at. There's bots, there's generative AI, there's the imaging piece as well. So maybe kind of break down for us, like, where are you most excited and maybe where you're a bit more cautious right now?
So I think like you were starting to say, so there's a whole continuum of what AI can do for us. And we've been doing AI for a long time. I mean, when you think about the bots and the little programs that can run and do something by themselves, everybody's had the thing where you can watch the keystrokes and it can do it for you if you want. We've had those recordings for a long time. So that's simple AI. That's bots, things that it can do by itself. Then you get into the stuff like Emily, the generative AI, where it's natural language processing, or it generates stuff, or it can write a letter that says, you declined our authorization, but here's all the information, pull that all together in a natural format. And then there's the AI that looks at scans, and that's much, much more advanced, I think, in the medical area. You can look at an x-ray of my lungs or whatever. I'm not a doctor, so don't count this, and you can see, oh, there's a nodule here, and I'm going to have AI color code it and then write up a report and do all this stuff that's there. And I have a feeling I'll see a bunch of it this week, that I don't think it's being widely adopted because there's all these different questions about security and what was it trained on and how well is it working, and and no matter what you have, you still have to have a person in the loop that validates it, right? You have to know, that you can really trust what's there. We use it in a bunch of different ways. We've been using bots for a long time. We're doing a lot of robotic process automation. So, if you make an appointment with MUSC, you will get a generated text that says, oh, Joshua, your appointment is next week. Please fill out these forms now so that you don't have to do it at the front desk, that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot more places for that. And that's really what I'm excited about because, like we just said, you can't hire enough people to do this stuff. So if you can take the easy things, the repetitive things off their plate, we're a health system. We fax referrals around. If we could just do that and have the data, all the data go into Epic and then be able to pull it in a work queue and then send you a note saying your referral's ready, please click here to schedule your appointment. That would be so much better for both you, the patient, as well as the provider who's doing it and whoever's typing it into Epic off the fax now. And then that lets that person do something else, make a more difficult decision-making process.
Are you seeing any pushback at all in trying about AI? Are there sort of use cases or situations where folks just are a lot less excited and may object more?
I think it's trust all the way around. We have a AI council that reviews how much risk is in each of these tools that we look at and comes up with a score. And, and that's looking at how the models were trained, how much transparency there is. We looked at a product at one point, and this wasn't even really an AI product, but you hold this piece of paper up to a baby to see if they're jaundiced or not. We were very excited about the prospect of this because sometimes babies go home Friday night and you can't get back in for that jaundice check until Monday or Tuesday. And so if they needed to go in the next day, they'd have to go to the ER. You don't want to bring a baby to the ER, blah, blah, blah. So we were excited about this technology. And then we realized after talking to the vendor a couple of times that they hadn't done any testing on anybody but white babies. And that just isn't something that, we could deploy throughout our health system, having a diverse population. So that doesn't make sense. So you have to really think about all these different pieces and what they're being trained on, what they're expected to do, that kind of stuff.
I'm curious, Crystal, as well, and this applies to AI, but it also applies to any tech or new implementation in general, even non-tech implementations. But what are 1 to 2 strategies that you implemented or are implementing to really ensure that the new innovation is actually enhancing either the patient care or provider's workflow, and it's not just complicating the workflow further? Providers are up on their feet all the time. They're running around. Their workflows are already complicated. So how do you ensure that that's really helping solve an issue as opposed to just kind of exacerbating an issue?
And I think that really falls into a change management type thing. We have a change manager on staff. We're very happy to have her to sit at the beginning and talk about the stakeholders and who's going to be using this and how are they going to use it? How does it change their process? And then getting those stakeholders involved. We look for champions as we do, and we do almost everything with a pilot first. So we look for some champions. And sometimes it's not always the, oh, pick me, I love tech tech kind of person. It's a person you look at their scores for something and decide, is this taking them a long time to close the charts? Or is it, some other things? Are they spending a whole bunch of pajama time? So in which case, Dr. Ludi, you may want to use this new tool that we have that's ambient listening and try to work that way because it can transcribe all your notes. And so you might be done at 5 o'clock if you do that, review what it says, and then make a couple of changes and send it. And you close your chart faster, you have less time, that kind of stuff. And once you get some champions going through it, and again, this goes back to the release it before it's 100% perfect. So it will never be 100% perfect. And once you put it in the wild, you'll find, oh, wait, no, I have better workflows built in my Epic templates than this tool can handle. So this isn't the right tool for me. And, we did that with our ambient listening pilot. We realized some doctors are really whiz-bang on their templates, and this didn't save time. Other doctors really liked it and found that they're very successful and they don't want it taken away. And then there's some doctors that would prefer to just do it on their own, or they have a real person scribe and they don't want to use it. So you have to make a choice for all of these things so that you can do that. Same thing with the phone. We have to, for Emily, the voice bot, we have to have it so that it can still handle a person. Because there's always going to be a person, like my mom, who will always want to talk. So you've got to give them that option. Or they might not have a, if you send them a text, they might not have a smartphone. So you have to make sure that they still can call or whatever as well. So tech is not always the end all be all. It does a lot for us, but we still have to take advantage of the rest of the world too.
Chris, I think to your point, a lot of it's about meeting people where they want to be met. And so for folks who need the live person, great. You still have access. For folks who are comfortable with the bot and maybe they feel like it's faster, there's a shorter line to talk to someone and they're good with it. Awesome. It's about meeting them where they want to be met. So I think that makes a ton of sense. You obviously worked with a lot of different vendors over the year. And I think vendors often, probably more than we should, need to reflect on what we're doing, what we're not doing well. So I'm curious, are there one or two things that you feel like your best vendors do particularly well that folks can learn from? And then for, let's call it the not so great experiences, what are one or two things that vendors just tend to get wrong? And you're like, gosh, you really should just know to do it differently.
Well, vendors that do it right partner, and their partners are not vendors. They succeed because you succeed. They're in the trenches with you. They answer your call at 5:00 at night when something went wrong, and they get out a call that can take hours if necessary to solve a problem with IT or whatever. So I have some really good vendors that are that. Vendors that get it wrong are the ones that overpromise and underdeliver and aren't honest about it. Tech is changing all the time. And so it's fine to say, we'd like to do that with you guys, but you will be the first. Instead of, oh yeah, we can do that. We can do that. And then you find out afterwards that, the project took 6 months and it was really difficult and they weren't ready. And then you find out later that this is a thing. And so we don't want to, be involved with that kind of thing. So we want to make sure that we're doing that and that they're just honest. I think that's the biggest thing. And also do some research. If you're trying to sell, do some research and don't have an assistant spam my email and say, well, you being this CDTO at MUSC, we know that your problems must be this, so therefore you need our tool. And then set up an appointment with my boss. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody has time for that. Honestly look and go, what is MUSC doing? Does your project fit? Is your stuff fit? And, then make an introduction and try to do something that provides value, not just junk.
I think the amazing thing, Crystal, is that, I think you're absolutely right. These seem like obvious things, but really it sounds like it's about showing up. It's about being reliable. It's like doing what you say you're going to do, being honest, putting in the time. They're obvious things, but clearly I think a lot of times folks just maybe we get a bit lazy and don't put in the effort, but it's just showing up. I mean, I know it sounds obvious, but it's real discipline, it sounds like.
It should be easy. It's a golden rule, right? Just do what you would want to. You don't want to buy a black box and not know that the stuff inside the box isn't going to work. But, I have no problem rolling up our sleeves and working with a vendor to try to get something new going I love being a pilot of a first or second run of something. If it fits, if it's something that we need and I'm going to get value out of it, then yeah, let's work together and work out the kinks so that we can do that. I'm all about that too.
Amazing. So another initiative that you recently rolled out was RPA, or robotic process automation for patient outreach. And I know one of the key use cases was breast cancer screening. Tell us a little bit more about why you started this, what happened, what you learned.
Yeah, so we use Notable for our robotic process automation, and that's the same tool that sends you a notification 3 days before your appointment to say, hey, pre-register for your appointment. You can even pay. You put in your driver's license, insurance card. And we knew we wanted to get that information and make this registration process easy for the patients, and found that reaching them out with text and then gathering that information, about 54% of our patients respond to that, which is great. And a lot of really good patient satisfaction with that. But we wanted to start reaching out to people that are missing appointments or doing things. And breast cancer was a big one because, during COVID, women stopped going. And then they never got back into the swing of going every year like you're supposed to or whatever. So we turned it on in Charleston, February 15th. And right overnight, we had 129 women that scheduled mammograms without any need to do anything else at all. and a lot of, no patient access person, nothing. They just click and go, need one? Yep. Here's a list of when and where you can go. Click, boom, done, scheduled. And we got all kinds of feedback back from women saying, this was so easy. Thank you for reminding me. And we've done over, I think, 2,000 mammograms since then that have been scheduled and completed. And out of that, we've actually found about 129 women that had something wrong and needed to come back in for additional screening or information or whatever. And so I'm probably one of my most proudest things that I've worked on is that project, because we're really saving lives in some aspect. And so back, little Crystal wanted to be a nurse at one time, but that's not my thing. But in this way, I am doing some things to help. So, yeah.
That's amazing. But besides the breast cancer screening, are there other low-hanging fruit use cases that you're thinking about next?
Oh, yeah. We just, because that was successful, we just did a Well Child campaign for back to school, reaching out, letting moms know that, they need to bring their kiddos in for those, standard shots or whatever, sports physicals, those kinds of things. We're going to start doing the same for diabetes and hypertension. We're going to do a flu shot one in the fall to remind people to come and get their flu shot. So there's a lot of opportunity for that type of outreach to engage patients and make sure they're taking the best care of themselves that they can be.
That's amazing. And I'm just curious, like for something like that, how involved do clinical champions need to be for each of those areas? Is it just because it's an obvious wellness check, you just do it, or it's no, actually it's a whole council that has to be involved to decide? And
we do. Well, yeah, we have a group that's in charge of that. They review the process, review how we're going to go outreach. I mean, we purposely did not send all 10,000 patients in the Charleston area reminder for their mammograms at the same time, because we'll get a backup of the system. So we send a certain amount, and we had to decide what the amount was, what the cadence should be, and so on as we went forward. And so we did a staged approach. Same for our Well Child visit too. So, but it's also marketing and wording and making sure that it's clear and really understandable. And so back and forth with the clinicians to make sure that we're saying things that would be, the right thing at the right time and the way that it should be said, so it's easy to understand. And the other thing is we translated that into Spanish too. So those texts come across in Spanish, and we get a lot of feedback from our Spanish-speaking patients saying that they really appreciate things being done for them in that language. So all good stuff.
Amazing. And is this all text-based, or do you do IVR as well for these programs?
These ones are text-based right now. We're looking at tying Emily to the notable. So if you don't take the, you don't answer the text, you don't answer a follow-up text, we can do a phone call following up after that if necessary. We're going to do some work in our EDs too, so that people, you have to follow up 5 days or so after you have an ED visit. So just sending them a reminder to say, hey, did you schedule this? Let's make sure you get scheduled. We care about your health. So
amazing.
Really cool. Well, Crystal, you mentioned earlier in the conversation how you don't just choose the champion for your pilots who's raising their hand and saying, hey, I'm really great with tech and I want to champion this. I've also heard you share in the past how you really need a network of champions within the organization to drive digital transformation. And I'm curious, how do you identify and empower those champions at MUSC? And what role do they play in the successful adoption of new technologies?
So we have different champions for different projects, right? And we're working in the Patient Access Center. We're really lucky that the head of the Access Center is super involved, and he had a couple of his brightest stars helping us through the whole project. And so we, weekly meetings and getting involved and helping us test and so on. When we roll out things like DAX, we started out with just a couple of people for the ambient listening, a couple of providers, and then started growing the group and evaluating that way. So it depends on the project as to what, when you get the champions. But I think having people, it's good that Crystal, the tech girl, says this is a great product and you should use it. And by the way, here's all the communications and all the things that we're going to do, which we do. But it comes differently if it's provider to provider or nurse to nurse or one PAC member to another, explaining how this is it has helped them, it will help them. And so that's why it's important to make sure you get champions on these projects.
There's probably all kinds of new innovations and projects you could start quarter after quarter, year after year. As you mentioned, we do have finite resources in the healthcare system. So I'm curious, how often are you almost reviewing and turning off stuff too that maybe fell a bit flat, maybe isn't relevant anymore, but used to be important? What's that process potentially like?
I think all health systems struggle with turning it off. It's like add more tech, and then you realize that there's just way too much stuff. And the other thing is that these tech companies are adding more and more things into their suite. So then they're like, well, but we could do that. We can do that. Did you know that we can make phone calls now? I have a phone vendor, so I don't need that piece of your software. I'm already really deep with that one or whatever. So it's a process. And, the hard thing for health systems is your budget cycle starts so early. Our fiscal year starts in July. So by January, I have to know what projects I'm going to do the following fiscal year. And, I did a roadmap when I first started 2 years ago. And that was before AI was really a thing. And November is when ChatGPT started getting strong. And all of a sudden we're like, oh, we got to look at ambient technology. We got to look at this. We got to look at that. So knowing that things change and, you got to be kind of flexible. And you also, that's why healthcare is also hard for vendors, because it's a good 18-month cycle of selling in before you can, because of the process it takes to, I'm going to look at you, I'm going to talk to you, we're going to have coffee, or whatever. You sort of date for a while to see if it's a good fit. And then you start thinking about how you bring it into the system, how you would pilot and so on. And that's probably going to be a year before that ever gets off the ground.
Wow. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, though. I think it's one of those things where, like, you need that planning because of the longer time horizon you talked about. At the same time, you're like, stuff does change, generative happens, and you got to be a little bit flexible as well so that you're not behind the curve either. So that makes a ton of sense. Now, we know everyone who leads these initiatives are also, like, highly interested in things that have nothing to do with healthcare and technology. And so you've been super creative, writing children's books and painting. And so I'm kind of curious, how do you feel like your artistic, creative endeavors kind of shape how you're leading in healthcare and tech?
For me, it's way to relax, right? I love to paint. I don't do it as much as I used to, but painting or even cooking, something that you get totally immersed in, so you get out of your head. So you're not constantly thinking about, what do I got to do tomorrow? What's on my to-do list? What that? Instead, you're just like, okay, well, I'm gonna make this look great, or I'm gonna try this fish today, or something. You totally get out of your head, and then usually I can think clearer about it afterwards. It's a really great way to relax, and it's just fun. And I think it's really important to make sure that you have fun. So you can't be all work and no play. So it just helps me, balance. And that's stuff that I tell my people that I mentor and my team, that they have to find time for the fun stuff too, because it's important.
Yeah, especially to avoid burnout and things that are so, prevalent today. Well, that's awesome. Crystal, just being mindful of your time, we're going to flip over to the Fast 5 lightning round. So this is just 5 rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
First question we have is, what is your favorite book or book you've gifted the most?
Well, my team, I made them read an old one. And so I gave everyone a copy of Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. That's probably 20 years old. And so we did that right before a team retreat. And then there was a video on YouTube about it. And we talked about it. And we had just done our disc profiles. And there's a whole thing about how the characters in the book tie to the disc profiles. And for us, really important to understand people moving fast and try, who's going after the next big thing. That's the whole thing of the book. The book's super easy if people haven't read it. So that's the one that I think we've used, I've done the most of recently anyway.
Yeah, awesome. I have not read that one, so I'll take a look. That's great. Question 2, who is a person, either dead or alive, who you'd love to meet?
Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Queen Elizabeth. To talk about someone who had an amazing life and strong leader, strong family woman, family meant everything to her. I just think that she would be amazing to meet.
Yeah, awesome. Question 3, would you rather have super strength, super speed, or the ability to read people's minds?
I do not want to know what people are thinking. I'd love to have super speed so that I could get places faster. We live in Charleston. My daughter lives in San Diego. It would be nice to not spend a whole day traveling to go see her, have her come see me. So, if I could super speed to San Diego and take her out to dinner, that would be amazing.
Yeah, love it. Question 4, what is something in healthcare you believe that others might find insane?
I think AI and automation is going to help us handle the healthcare crisis. I think that's, the voice bot and our automations are a work in process, but, in an automated world where we can research a provider online, schedule an appointment, get a referral, and have that all automized is going to make, all that automation is going to make things better in the long run.
Yeah.
but it's work to get there.
Yeah, totally. Last question that we have, what is the last film or TV show you saw and what did you think of it?
I just recently downloaded Ripley, so I could watch it on the plane. It's based on the Talented Mr. Ripley books. It's a con artist, and I love it because it's black and white. And so the cinematography on it is so amazing. It's set in Italy, and it's just beautiful. The whole area is beautiful. And then some of the things are a little more sinister when he's really thinking, because it's black and white. It reminds you of those old movies. So really enjoying watching that on my planes.
Yeah, no, awesome. And it looks fascinating. I can't wait to take a look. Well, thank you, Crystal. That's unfortunately a wrap of this episode of The Digital Patient, hosted by Seamless MD. You can follow us on Twitter at Seamless MD. If you like the podcast and you want to learn more, you can visit www.seamless.md. And Crystal, Ms. Broj, again, thank you so much for spending the hour with us and sharing your wisdom with our audience. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I really had fun.